Hey there, everybody. This week's real estate chat, we're talking about appraisals. What are they and how do they affect you? How do they affect you if you're the buyer? How do they affect you if you're the seller? So basically, an appraisal is a valuation of your house compared to other recently sold or of the property you're trying to buy, um, compared to recently sold properties in the area. An appraiser needs to look at some very specific things such as size of the house, or if it's bigger or smaller, more bedrooms, less bedrooms, they're going to have to adjust that price. It needs to be approximately the same age, the same style, so you don't generally compare a split level to a ranch. Sold within the last 6 months, but even a smaller time frame, is, if possible, is better. And in the same general neighborhood and area, you don't look at a house on one side of town and a house on the other side of town, and even if they're the exact same house, they're not really good comps there. So they're going to look at the comparables, they're going to look at the market, they're going to look at the condition of the house and take that into account. So appraisals are required in several different loan types. The most commonly known are VA and FHA. Those obviously require appraisals. Occasionally I see a conventional loan that asks for an appraisal, but you can frequently waive them in that situation. You can choose to get an appraisal with any type of loan, even if your loan doesn't require it, or even if you're buying with cash. And the reason that you want to do that is to make sure that you're not paying more than the house is actually worth in the market. How it affects you, with VA buyers, FHA, those appraisals look at the value, but they also have very specific features that they look at and may cite. They will talk about things that affect safety of the occupants or that could lead to deterioration of the house. So one that we see really, really frequently and commonly is peeling paint. If you have peeling paint on the siding or damaged siding of any kind, or peeling paint on a deck or a porch, that's going to be a problem, and the VA appraiser is going to require that to be fixed, or FHA appraiser is going to require that to be repaired before they will bless off on the loan, basically. So keep that in mind. Other things, GFI outlets, we see that frequently. You should have, they want GFI outlets in the kitchen and the bathrooms. And there's a few other things, but like I said, those mostly have to do with either a safety hazard, as in the outlets, or something that would lead to further deterioration and devaluation of the home, such as the paint issue. Because if you have chipping paint on your siding, the wood underneath it's not protected. So just keep those things in mind. Now, an appraisal is not a home inspection. They do not look at every system thoroughly. They do not dig into things as thoroughly as a home inspector does, or look at as many things, or even tell you. They're not going to tell you a lot of the little things that a VA appraisers or that a home inspector is going to tell you. So please don't confuse the two. They're very different things and they have very different purposes. Now, how does this affect you? So whether you're a buyer or a seller, you're under contract with a loan that requires an appraisal. You get the appraisal. A couple things can happen. The appraisal can come back at or above value of the house. The buyer gets the appraisal. The seller does not get a copy of the appraisal. It belongs to the buyer. And they don't have to disclose the information in it unless repairs are required. So you could get the appraisal, the buyer could get the appraisal back, and it could say the value's fine and there's no required repairs. Great, everything's good to go. We proceed with the transaction. You could get the appraisal back and it could say the value's fine, but there's some issues that need to be corrected. Those issues will have to be corrected, or we will not be able to close on that house and get that loan. The loan will not be approved without correcting those issues. Now, the buyer can correct those issues, or the seller can correct those issues. Usually the seller does it. It just usually typically falls to the seller, but that's not a rule. The buyer can arrange to have those done, or you can negotiate price, potentially, depending on the actual valuation. But it has to be completed before the loan can close, most of the time. There's some exceptions to that rule, but I don't have time to get into that today. But it has to be done, so just count on it needing to be done before we can close on the house. Or another option, it could come back where there's no repairs required, but the value is too low. It's less than what you thought you were going to pay or thought you were going to get if you're the seller for the home. In that situation, the choices are the seller can lower the price to meet the appraised value. And in that situation, you'll be given evidence that that is actually the appraised value as a seller. The buyer can bring the difference in cash to closing out of pocket, and not, the loan can only be for the appraised amount. So they can't, so if your house appraises $5,000 too low, say somebody offered $200 and it appraised for $195, either the seller can lower it to $195, everybody can agree, we're doing $195 instead. The buyer can bring $5,000 to closing to cover the difference, or the contract can get canceled. You can also split the difference, so it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. It can be the buyer's going to bring $2,500 and the seller's going to come down $2,500. Just keep in mind that if you're paying more than the appraised price, you're paying more than the market value of the house. So as a seller, keep in mind that nobody wants to pay more than the market value of the house. Why would you want to? If you go to Walmart and milk is $1 and you go to Dillon's and milk is $2, you're probably going to buy your milk at Walmart. Like, you just don't want to pay more than something's worth. Nobody does, right? So as a seller, keep that in mind when making these decisions, and keep in mind that you can go back on the market, but there's a good chance you're going to go through this whole system again and end up with an appraiser that's also too low. So those are things to keep in mind as making a decision. As a buyer, keep in mind that if you pay more than the appraised value, you may not recoup that when you turn around and sell the house. So if this is a house you love, it's your dream home, it's wonderful, we're retiring here, we're gonna, this is where our grandkids are gonna come visit us, we're gonna live here forever, then paying $5,000 or $10,000 over really isn't gonna be a big deal in the long term as far as financial loss. Now, if it's more than that, that could weigh differently, but as an example. But if you're moving in 3 or 4 years because you're a military family and you're going to get orders and you're going to leave, maybe it might not be such a financially savvy decision. So those are just all the things you need to consider when making that decision on how the appraisal comes out. And then finally, the appraisal could and frequently does come back with repairs that need to be made and an adjustment that needs to be made in the price. So those are kind of what happens. And like I said, the options are, in any of those situations, the seller takes care of it, the buyer takes care of it. There's some combination of both, and this has to be something everybody agrees to, or you cancel the contract and take your chances with going back on the market. So that's what an appraisal is. This was a longer video than normal, so I apologize, but that's what an appraisal is in a nutshell, and how it affects you as a seller or a buyer in a nutshell. So obviously, that's the condensed Reader's Digest version. If you want more information, if you have questions about any of this, send me a message and I'm happy to try to clear up anything else that you are wondering about appraisals or anything in the home buying or selling process. So have a great rest of your week and a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.